Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today we have James Saperstein, the Chairman and CEO of AzurRx. James?
Hi, thank you for inviting me to the conference. I'm happy to present AzurRx. This is our most recent presentation. As most company CEOs like to show you a company disclaimer, you might hear some information that you've not heard before, but keep this to yourself for now. Okay, so AzurRx is a NASDAQ company, it's a clinical stage company. We are specifically in the gastroenterology space. We have two assets, but we have three clinical indications. Our lead asset is MS-1819. It's lipase for exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. And we compete against PERTs, which are pancreatic enzyme replacement therapy products. We've actually done a lot of trials with this compound. It's in phase 2 right now, and I'll get into some of that data in a few minutes. Our second asset is a micronized niclosamide. Niclosamide is an anti-helminthic or anti-parasite drug that's been around for about 50 years, not really sold here in the United States, but we are looking to repurpose it for GI type diseases. And working with a company called First Wave, a friend of mine, Gary Glick, that I've known for 45 years, who's a prolific chemist, has come up with a micronized version of niclosamide, which we believe to be far more effective than any of the other niclosamides that are out there. Right now, we're looking at two indications. One is for GI-related COVID. COVID is very much in the news. And the other is for immune checkpoint inhibitor colitis. Checkpoint inhibitors are very popular drugs that are used in cancer. So we brought these compounds in so we could leverage our company's core competency along the line of what we do in the GI tract, and we didn't have to hire a whole lot more people because we have all these different indications. So right now we believe we're addressing markets of excess of several $1 billion. If you look at the management team going from right to left, Martin has been with the company for the longest. He does our business development, corporate development work, PR, IR. Dan Schneiderman is our CFO. Dan joined us in January of 2020 at this point. I think 2020. The pandemic makes you lose sight a little bit of timing, but Dan's doing a terrific job, has great experience as a public company CFO, and also had worked on the banking side for a while. Jim Pennington is our chief medical officer. Jim and I go back about 37 years when he was a professor at Harvard Medical School and used to lecture on infectious diseases. Since then, he spent 25 years in the industry, Bayer, Intermune, and some smaller companies. He came to AzurRx from another PERT company called Anthera, which just had an issue in phase 3 in manufacturing, and we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen to our product as well. And we've learned a lot of lessons that we're going in the right direction. Myself, 37 years in the business, 17 years in big pharma. I started with Eli Lilly, then to Roche, then to Bristol Myers, and then a small company called Gilead that no one had heard of at the time. And then I went on to run a larger biotech company called Serono in the US, and then eventually started my own through venture capital to Beer Therapeutics, which was eventually sold for $1.7 billion to Allergan, and then went on to do a small wound care company, had a nice exit out of there after doing a deal with Celgene, then Contravir, and then I took some time off and landed here at AzurRx, and lots of people ask me why. And I like to talk about my first experience in the industry when I was with Eli Lilly, where we were launching human insulin for the use in diabetes. And at that time, porcine derived and bovine derived, or pigs and cows derived insulin was being used for about 85 years. And most of the endocrinologists said, well, why would we want to take an insulin that comes from grown in vats through DNA, E. coli from DNA, it's recombinant DNA. It all sounds far too scientific. Well, I know that we were able to convert all the patients over because it was human insulin. Patients who were taking pork-derived insulin over the years developed resistance. They had to take more and more and more. their outcomes were not as good as patients who were taking actual human insulin. So it's the same case with MSAT19. There is resistance to some of these products because they are pork products. They're ground up pig pancreas that's put into powder form and put into capsules. Ours comes from an enzyme, a yeast enzyme. We grow it and it's natural and it's much more humanized than anything else that's on the market. So when you look to where we are, we've done for instance, in pancreatitis, we did our proof of concept. We've studied monotherapy. The second trial that's come out is called Option 2. And it was mixed results. We saw some patients do really, really well. And some patients, the drug just passed right through the intestine and through the colon, and you didn't see much results. We just announced trial results of the combination therapy. Little better results than we saw in Option 2, but also some very, very sick patients who are failing, their refractory patients. We saw a lot of these patients get better. Their CFA increased 5% or better, and we know through the literature that that's clinically valuable and clinically viable. So we're very happy with the results of that study, but still we believe that we need to improve our formulation, and we're going with something called an enteric microbead trial, and that's going to be a much, much smaller trial. Why this formulation? Well, we decided to go, now that we have some capital, go out and spend the capital and use the same formulation that our competitors use, AbbVie and which makes Creon, and Nestle that makes that makes Zenpep, who used to be Allergans. And AbbVie, I can tell you, before they went to the microbeads, they also struggled to get positive CFAs. They were just below what the FDA wanted them to. They changed over to the microbeads, and then hence they hit the numbers the FDA was looking for. We expect the same thing to happen with us, and then we've got a wide open market. You see the niclosamide programs as well. I will talk about those in a few minutes. Let's talk about MSAT19. It's an exocrine pancreatic insufficiency in cystic fibrosis and chronic pancreatitis. For our sake, I'm going to focus more on the cystic fibrosis. It's a big market, nearing, it's over $2 billion now. Clear unmet medical need. Let's face it, if you were a parent of a cystic fibrosis child, would you want them on a human product, or would you want them on a pork product where they might have some problems? Certainly you'd want them on a human product. So we're able to release our top line monotherapy data back in January of this year. And we last week released the data on combination therapy. So we've hit all our milestones, things we've been talking about a year. We've been able, even in this time of the pandemic, where a lot of sites have given us a lot of issues, shutting down, opening up, shutting down. We're able to get all of this moving. We're able to complete the trial on time. So how do these people present with EPI? It's really poor fat absorption. They lose a lot of weight, frequent bowel movements, lots of diarrhea, abdominal pain. And these folks who are on cystic fibrosis drugs take a lot of medications. They lead a pretty tough life. Most of us think of, the rails and having to pound their chest because of all the mucus build up in their lungs. Well, that same enzyme insufficiency that's missing for their lungs to take on all this mucus, same thing happens in the gut. So they build up the inability really to absorb nutrients. So in the United States, it's a genetic disease. It's about 30,000 patients. Chronic pancreatitis in the United States is a little bigger, but certainly it's an orphan disease. It should allow us to move quickly once we have the final results from our next study. So it's a large market. In the US alone, it's about 1.4 billion. Worldwide, it's excess of 2 billion. The largest market share folks are AbbVie, which is they have Creon. And the second place is Zenpep, which is Nestle. And then there's a whole host of other ones. But I'm here to tell you, they're all crushed up pig pancreases, all of them. They all compete against each other. So our hurdle that we need to hit is a 80% CFA, which is coefficient factor. But in terms of safety, we've hit that hurdle already. We're shown to be much safer. We don't have any antigenicity issues. that are associated with the porcine product. So again, just to compare, we come from the East. We're much more stable in acidic GI environments. Safety profile is excellent compared to the porcine. Let's face it, you're not putting in pig or animal products in your body. You're putting something that's human. We think if you look at the right side chart, we think we can get from 25 to 40 pills per day to 8 to 16 pills per day. Very significant when these kids are taking multi-meds all day long. You look at the red capsules, I mean, they seem to be a meal itself. And they're bigger than what we have. So we're also from a sourcing and supply issue. It's a much more consistent supply. We make it from East. We don't have to worry about slaughtering pig herds. Late last year in 2020, the swine flu hit. There was a shortage of AbbVie product all over the world because there wasn't enough pig pancreas available. You would not have that problem with our product. So what happened with our trial? So with option 2, we tested several different programs or capsules, enteric capsules, which we thought was going to be the answer, and 2 and 4 grams, immediate release, which is our old formulation, and 4 6 grams. And what we saw is that every single cohort did about the same. So the trial showed the drug is not dose dependent. The drug is really absorption dependent. So what does that mean? Didn't matter what dose we use, what formulation we use. Clearly, some patients reached 80% CFA and above. Clearly, some patients did not absorb it and reached 0. But for our results, we have to show an average CFA. So even if you got someone who hit 90, someone who hit 0, the average is 45. Hence, it takes our CFA down. So we need to do the work to find out why there's certain patients that do not absorb this drug. And it's been very independent. Moving on to our combination study, we had a small amount of the PERTs and we had a small amount of our drug. Again, we saw we were not dose dependent. Didn't matter if you gave 700 milligrams, 1 gram, or 2 grams. These patients, some of them did miraculously well, 95% CFA. They were feeling great. Some people hit 40 CFA. And that was probably just the PERT that was working. And our drug slid right on through. So we're just trying to figure all that out. However, we do know from the combination study that we do have clinical meaningful data. That means the CFAs for all these patients at least improved over 5%. And that is clinically meaningful. The PIs, the doctors that we spoke to, were all very happy with the results. So to all our investors out there, we have a drug. We know we have a drug. It's active. I've been associated with a lot of products that you get there all the way to phase 2, and all of a sudden, it worked well before, and then you go to a bigger study, it doesn't work. This drug works. It's just a question of getting the right formulation done. We're working on that right now. We'll do a small bridging study, and then that should satisfy everyone, including the FDA. So let's talk about see if I have any questions yet. By all means, if you have questions, just put them in the Q&A and I'll get to them. Let's talk about niclosamide and why we licensed in niclosamide from First Wave Bio. So niclosamide's been around a very long time, close to 50 years actually. It's got a huge clean safety history. However, you have to give it in clumps. You have to give a lot of products. Why? Because it's got a very low oral bioavailability. It doesn't stay in the system very long. But when it's in the system, it does a great job inhibiting pro-inflammatory pathways. So some people who have pain that have to take steroids, the niclosamide has assisted them with that. So we know we've had opportunities for combination with standard of care for multiple indications along all sorts of GI effects. So why bring it in from First Wave? Number one, they developed this micronized version. So you need a very small amount of drug to get the same effect that you would have needed with a handful of drug. It's not systemically absorbed, allows for higher GI concentrations, but it also avoids all these steroid-related complications. So if you were going to be on a steroid to diminish inflammation, the niclosamide goes in and diminishes that indication. So you don't have to be on the steroids for a long period of time. And that's important, especially with people who have cancer, because they have enough side effects as it is. You don't want to add another drug that possibly might tell the patient they need to go off their cancer drug in order to bring down the inflammation before they can go on. You don't want to interrupt their therapy. Niclosamide is not an injectable, it's an oral drug. It's easy to take. We've got uh, some data that First Wave has on ulcerative proctitis that we got to took a look at. That gave us the confidence to license it in for these other colon type of indications. We know they've got a strong IP package for 20 years, and we believe we can get an expedited pathway, the 505(b)(2), potential for breakthrough therapy at the FDA on several of the indications, I should say. So what makes the micronized formulation important? It's a reduced particle size, about 7 micrometers, compared to the regular non-micronized, which is greater than 60 micrometers. The smaller particle sizes have greater surface area and to solvent of the GI fluids ratio. What does that mean? So as the GI fluids flow, because you've got a much smaller gradient, more of it gets absorbed, but not systemically. They just take on a lot more of the liquids because of a smaller surface area. So it also allows for broader dissolution and broader and broader distribution and higher local GI concentrations with a much lower dose. We know in our animal studies that it confirms that we have higher GI concentrations greater than 200 times that that we've seen with micronized niclosamide, and the micronized formulation is similar to the non-micronized niclosamide. It's just not systemically absorbed in animal studies. And like I said, it's got a clinical profile, a safe clinical profile. So let's talk about what got us excited. This is something we saw while we were doing the in-licensing. There was a study that came out of Arizona State that showed that 48% of all the stool samples in a dormitory were positive for RNA, the COVID virus RNA. So even though these people were feeling better, some of them were vaccinated, they were still carrying the virus. And we also know that close to 20% of all COVID patients, including some of my investors who have had COVID, are having terrible bouts of GI distress, diarrhea for months, 2 or 3 months. It's awful. So the symptoms include severe diarrhea, vomiting, abdominal pain. So what does that mean? People who've been vaccinated are also experiencing this in the long haul COVID patients. We believe, and I believe it as well, because I worked in HIV for about 20 years, HIV hides. It hides in reservoirs in the testes and some other areas in the body. We believe COVID hides as well. It's a very smart virus. It keeps mutating. We have well over 100 variants around the world now. And we believe it hides in the lung tissue, in the lower lung, the deep lung tissue, but also hides in the GI tract. So our goal with niclosamide is, because it's non-systemic, is to get it out of the GI tract. So we know because it's we could spread it fecally, but also, let's face it, not everybody goes to the restroom, washes their hands all the time. Not every American or anyone around the world practices the best hygiene, even in times of pandemic. That's another way to spread the virus. Right now, there's no treatment available for COVID diarrhea. We would be the first one. And we also know that ACE2 is a very common entry inhibitor for COVID-19. It's very highly expressed in the GI cells. For those of you who've been following the science and people have been taking losartan and whatnot for the ACE2 inhibition, we believe COVID will act there as well. So we think we can hit the virus from a multitude of positions. So the Institute of Pasteur in Korea did a screen of all repurposed products and for COVID-19, and niclosamide had the best screen. In fact, it showed almost a 40% increase against remdesivir, which was the Gilead drug that was approved. We know how it works. It basically induces autophagy of all COVID-infected cells. It reduces COVID propagation, which means the replication of COVID around the body. The local GI niclosamide concentration reaches low levels, but enough to kill the COVID-19. We've confirmed that in animal studies. And we also show the micronization does not lead to systemic absorption. We have a reservoir trial, which we've just begun. We're waiting for our first patient to come in. We hope to have top-line data by first quarter 2022. We also know there's a low cost of goods and scalable manufacturing with this drug. So this is really what the protocol looks like. It's a stage of development. It's 505(b)(2) pathway. Phase 2 has been initiated. So the treatment of SARS-CoV-2, dosing is 400 milligrams 3 times a day, up to 14 days for the use of concomitant systemic antivirals. We'll see. The FDA may say we need it by ourselves. And currently, there are no treatments for GI infections associated with COVID. Okay. Checkpoint inhibitor colitis, which is a mouthful. What are checkpoint inhibitors? Let me just try to. Okay. Sorry, it wasn't working for a second. So checkpoint inhibitors you've heard of. You've probably seen them on TV like Yervoy, Opdivo, Keytruda. Great drugs used in all sorts of cancers right now. It's saving a lot of people's lives. Problem with most anti-chemotherapeutic agents, it leads to recurrent diarrhea, colitis. So if people have to get off their drugs, it reduces really survival. They also go on non-steroidals, or they go on aren't steroidals. There is an unmet clinical need to treat grade 1 diarrhea. So where we're going to really decide that we're going to compete is really in grade 1. This is the ASCO terms for diarrhea. You can see grade 4 is life-threatening hospitalization. Grade 3, you're also hospitalized. By that time, the patient's off the checkpoint inhibitor. We want to treat patients in grade 1 when they're just starting to get GI discomfort, and they can take niclosamide to address that. In terms of incidence, there's currently about 260,000 cancer patients around the country. Around 44% of these patients are being treated for advanced and metastatic tumors. In ICIs that are increasing, we estimate that within 3 years, you're going to have 300,000 patients treated. The trend is to use combination therapy with some of these patients, and approximately 30% of these patients will get some sort of diarrhea. Let me show you a chart. You see, these are the more important products here, which is Yervoy, Opdivo, Keytruda. They're starting to be used in combination so they can be made more effective. And you can see they all have a fair amount of diarrhea and colitis. That's why we believe we're the perfect drug for them at the perfect time. So we have the potential to prevent GI disease and damage and stop disease progression and colitis, and also get something that has a very fast onset of action, but also help them maintain a long remission. We know we reduce systemic immune suppression and also reduces off-target adverse events such as what the steroids would do. Functions through mitigating pathogenic lamina propria T cells and decreases the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, which is really, you have the cytokine cascade, which introduces all this inflammation. Niclosamide helps calm that down, not only in ICI checkpoint colitis, but also in COVID-19. Okay, it's just winding down the presentation. As far as IP, we have protection until 2028 with MS-1819. We still haven't applied for Hatch-Waxman, but we'll get 5 more years on that. And we also are a biological, so we should be able to get exclusivity on there from 12 to 10 years. So we're looking at around 2040 of having enough patent protection. The first wave also, most of theirs were filed in 2020, most of their IP, and they have formulation, use of patent, method of use, formulation. So they're going to be tough ones to break. They're pretty solid. And they have patents on all their indications through 2040 as well. So rounding out the presentation again, we are a 3-shot on goal company at this point, MS-1819 and cystic fibrosis. We do expect to finish the bridging trial early next year. And we've been talking to lots of partners about licensing this product out. We won't do it on our own. As soon as we fix that, I'm sure things will start moving in the right direction for those partnership discussions. Right now, people have looked at our data. They like it. They want us to fix our formulation. The GI COVID indication, as I said, we started the study. We'll try to do that as quickly as we can. Granted, everyone's vaccinated. I get it. It's a great thing. But we still have millions and millions of patients out there who have had COVID, the long haulers. They're still going to be suffering from the side effects, and there's still going to be new infections. And until we get the multivariants, which you'll see, we might have another wave of this. So we want to be located in the right spot. And then, of course, the checkpoint inhibitor colitis, we do plan on starting the study very soon and finishing in 2000, late 2021, early 2022. A very exciting program. Again, we should get breakthrough on that as well. And with that, I'll stop. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. I'm looking to see. I don't see any open questions at this point. At this point, I want to thank you for listening, and thanks for being investors in AzurRx. Sasha, I think we're
Okay,
good.
thanks so much.
Okay. Yeah, there's no question.